I came across an ad. I don't remember if it was on Facebook or email or what it was, but it was for this real estate program. They do like a free 1-day class. Come to this free 1-day class, So I didn't even really understand what it was about, but I was like in that mode of like, okay, something's got to change. So I went to the 1-day class at some hotel, and what they say is, okay, you will pay $1,000 for this 3-day class, and we'll teach you everything you need to know about how to buy apartments. So I was like, okay. And they say, you don't need your own money to buy apartments. I'm like, all right, okay. So I was intrigued. It seemed kind of far-fetched, but they do a really, really good job of pitching it. One thing I'll say about this whole program is the salespeople are really, really great at their jobs. So
How many people were at the seminar?
I would say there was about 50.
I mean, is this like a Hilton or is this like a Motel 6? I mean, is this like a
Right.
Hyatt? Like, is it like a night? This is like a nice, like you walked in and said, hey, this is
It wasn't that nice of a
okay.
hotel.
Well,
Right.
you ever been, you've been to them. Like you'll go in one place and
Yeah.
you're like, they spent some money on this. Like there's
Right.
some money behind this. And then other ones you go to and you're like, oh wow, this is
Yeah.
pretty bad.
So I decided to pay for the 3-day class, and that was at a okay, mediocre place in Garden City, which is part of Boise, but I decided to go ahead and pay for the 3-day class. I was just in that place in life where it's like, I'm gonna do something. Something's gotta give, for me and my kids. So I decided to go ahead and do it. And they're telling you, you're gonna learn everything in 3 days.
How many people were in that class?
Probably about 50.
Okay.
Yeah, 40 or 50 people. So yeah, they give you this book, they're doing this presentation, there's a lot of hype to it, a lot of excitement, and you're feeling really excited too. And what I learned later on down the road was a lot of the things they were saying in that class weren't true, but you don't know it at the time because this aspect of real estate, what they're telling you about is called syndication. So, where you're pooling money together from investors to buy apartments. And they're telling you, there's an acquisition fee. That's how you get paid. That's how you make money. So they're teaching you there's
Kind of like the Grant Cardone.
exactly.
You get a bunch of investors that dump money into a fund, you buy the properties,
Right.
and then they're supposed to get a dividend when they start making money.
Exactly. It is the same thing he's teaching, which I had never heard of Grant Cardone at the time. So they're teaching you there's general partners, which are the active investors, the people that are going to buy the apartments, do the rehab work,
Manage it.
yeah, do the asset management, and then there's limited partners, and those are going to be the passive investors. You're going to pool their money together. So you get a loan, and then you use the investor's money for the rest of it to make up the rest of the money for the purchase price, for the rehab, for your acquisition fee, whatever, closing costs, whatever. So the investors end up paying for everything.
So if the property you're buying is $5 million and the bank says we'll lend you $3 million, because on a commercial loan,
Right.
they don't really care where the down payment comes from as long as they're not lending too much money. Like if they were lending 95%, they'd be like, oh, no. We need to know exactly where all the down payment money is, who's going to manage it. But if they're putting down 60% loan to value, $3 million on a $5 million purchase, they're putting down $3 million. They can't lose. Like if it goes under, the bank's getting their money back. Everybody else might lose their money, but the bank's going to get their money back. So
Right.
you're saying that you've got the what you call them, primary
General
partners. So the
partners.
general partners are putting up whatever, $1 million, and then the next million's coming from limited partners. The limited partners have no say in anything though. They're giving you
Right.
like, here's 20 grand. Here's 40 grand, here's 5 grand, and they're going to get a percentage on whatever that property ends up yielding after the rehab, after it's renovated, after it's occupied, after everybody gets paid, whatever profit, they get a little piece of that. and they're being
Usually around what they say is usually around the end of the third quarter is when
it starts coming back.
investors should start getting some kind
Yeah,
of distribution.
because it takes time
Yeah,
to do all that.
a little bit of time to, get the rehab going and everything. But yeah, you've got the loan, and then the investor's money. And what I didn't know at the time from this class, these programs go from state to state, city to city every single weekend selling these programs. Is one of the big sales pitches for this particular program is they're saying general partners get a 5% acquisition fee, and it's right off the bat, right when you close. So the lending process, though, for these commercial loans, the general partners have to be able to qualify for, whatever $1 million loan it is.
Mhm.
And it is quite a bit of paperwork, quite a bit of proof that you have the net worth of that loan. But the lenders understand, okay, this is a syndication process. They understand that they're raising the money.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they don't expect them to have it all like at that point in time, basically.
Well, it's the underwriting guidelines are more laxed because
Yeah,
they're putting down because the bank is in first position and they're not covering
right.
90% of the purchase, they're covering 60%. Like
Right.
if you're in
It
first.
got lower over the
Oh,
last
is it?
couple years. Well, yeah, they used to do like 75 to 80, but
Wow.
once we hit about 2021, it started going down to 60, 65,
Yeah.
70%. And so, with this 5% acquisition fee that was drawing in the students, I didn't know until about a year ago that that is not a normal acquisition fee, that that's something that like the SEC considers a huge red flag. So people like me are being drawn into this program going, oh, wow, look you can make a 5% acquisition fee right off the bat. They're telling you certain roles that you would have in this program, like, oh, you can get paid just for sourcing the deals, like building relationships with brokers, or you can learn how to do the underwriting, or you can raise money. You can be a capital raiser, which that was a whole really interesting role, the whole capital raising thing, because the SEC guidelines are you cannot, unless you have a broker dealer license, you cannot just go and raise money and make a fee.
Hmm.
And in these deals, they have a whole carve out for capital raising. And they'll say, oh, but you also have to have another substantial role in the deal. And what I learned getting into it is most people don't. They're just getting paid to raise money for the deals, and they don't have a substantial role.
So they're like unlicensed,
Yeah,
unlicensed brokers or financial advisor, whatever, but they're supposed to be licensed. They're just not.
exactly.
So,
And
'cause
it's happening every day.
so wait a minute. Everybody needs a good pair of jeans. What I like about the perfect jean is that the moment you put them on, they feel like sweatpants. They don't ever pinch or bind up. As a matter of fact, they're super stretchy. There's never any point where you feel like they're binding up on you or they're tight or they pinch you or anything like that. They're comfortable in pretty much any position that you sit in. They're really great. They're comfortable and they look great. Normally, a good pair of jeans costs anywhere between $150 to $200, but the perfect jeans are reasonably priced at $79.99. For a limited time, our listeners get 15% off their first order plus free shipping at theperfectjean.nyc or Google The Perfect Jean and use promo code COX15 for 15% off. That's 15% off for new customers at theperfectjean.nyc with promo code COX15. Please support our channel and tell them we sent you. Your khakis, get the perfect jeans. So let's go back to the 50 people. You paid $1,000. There's 50 people. They're pitching. It's 3 days. They tell you they're going to teach you everything.
right.
What happens during that? Did they teach you everything to acquire the property, or they're really
No,
just trying to move you to the next level?
they're moving you to the next step. And so these are some of the things they're saying. They're pulling you in with the 5% fee. They're pulling you in with, oh, you can charge your investors the $40,000 program fee, because then you find out like you're not really learning everything. There's a $40,000 program fee after that they want you to buy into. And they're saying these things during the 3 days that you end up finding out aren't true at all. You can't charge your investors $40,000 on your first deal. They're saying, oh, you can just stick it in the closing statement or you can put it into the underwriting template. And when you have an aspect of real estate like this that most people have never heard of,
Hmm.
people in mortgage, realtors have never heard of syndication before. So it's like the easiest thing to deceive people.
Yeah, well, yeah, they have no. I
Y-
would say you can convince anybody you're an expert if you just have a little bit more knowledge than they do. Like you don't need to have a whole
Absolutely.
bunch more, just a
Yeah.
little bit, just enough for
Yeah.
you to kind of go, "What? I've never heard about that." Yeah, this is how it works. And
Yeah.
even if it's not true, if it's
Yeah.
not true, then it's even easier to convince them that you're an expert, especially on
Yeah.
something they've never heard because they don't know anything
Exactly.
about this. They don't know. They don't know to say, "Well, wait a minute. No, no." I now they might if they were a licensed stockbroker or a licensed financial advisor or they were a licensed like a mortgage broker, they might be in a position to say, wait a minute, they've already taken a class. They might be like, wait a minute,
But it was
I
all
can't.
legit. It was all true. It's just the way that they're going about it. Like typically you would have a 1% acquisition fee. You know, there are capital raisers, but you need to have a more substantial role in the deal. So it's a very interesting thing because it's all legit stuff. It's just the way they're going about it. And then there were blatant lies as well. Like the whole you can put $40,000, you can charge your investors on your first deal $40,000
Well,
with
how much is the investor putting into the deal in order for me to charge $40,000? Or you're just saying I can just charge them, hey, $40,000 to allow you to be a part of this deal? And then they
no.
put in $10,000 and give me 40? I mean, is it what? I don't
Right. Yeah.
understand.
It kind of really doesn't make a lot of sense. So on these deals, they'll put like a minimum investment per person, like either 50,000 or 100,000. Even when they say there's a minimum $100,000 investment, a lot of times they'll let people put in less, like 50 or $40,000. So
No.
they were telling the students, like in general, you could just charge overall all the investors, just put it onto the closing statement, take $40,000 and reimburse yourself out of the closing statement. Does that make sense? So
Well,
not like you're charging one investor, you'd be charging all the
so if I've got
investors.
5 investors, each
Hmm.
one of them I'm charged is putting in the minimum 100,000 a piece.
Right.
That's $500,000. Then when we go to closing, they put in the $500,000, and my broker fee or whatever I'm sure they don't call it a broker fee. They
Right.
call it some.
Acquisition fee.
The acquisition fee is $40,000, and that fee goes to me.
No, they're taking a 5% acquisition fee off of the purchase price. And then they're saying you can also take $40,000 back for your program fee.
So if the purchase price is they're putting in 500,000,
Hmm.
purchase price is 200 million or 2 million, and I'm taking 5% of
Yep.
2 million
Yeah.
and 40,000.
Yes. That's what they were saying. Plus a
That's a good deal
1%,
for me.
plus a 1%
Right?
loan guarantor fee.
1% loan guarantor fee.
Yeah.
What does that mean? What is
That
that?
means that you're charging your investors because you qualified for a loan.
I'm charging them 1%
Yeah.
and the 5% and the 40 grand.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
How much are these investors expecting to get in return? Are they promised anything, or they're just told, or are they
Yeah.
given a vague number like, oh, it could be up to?
No, so they'll do like webinars and presentations and say like you'll get a 7 pref, so 7% return on your money, and then at the end you'll 2 times your money, you'll 2.5 times your money.
10x.
Yeah, 10x
Yeah.
exactly. Or like a 20% total return on your money. So aside from the distributions, the small distributions, once the apartment complex sells, then out of those profits, the limited partners who will have a certain percentage of ownership. So the general partners, let's say, have 30% ownership of the overall business. The limited partners will have 70% of the overall apartment complex business. This
Okay.
syndication's considered a business. So when you sell it at the end, the investors get their portion of the overall profit is what's supposed to happen. But throughout the time, they should be getting small distributions, if that makes sense.
Right. So, okay. So after the 3 days,
Hmm.
you're being told there are all these different avenues that you can make money.
Right, the
Which one?
different roles in the syndication, like, you could get paid for broker relations, you can get paid for asset management, you can get paid for underwriting.
So they're basically hiring you to do this.
Well, they're saying you're gonna go out and start your own business doing this, and very few people succeed at it,
Right.
So what I found was a lot of people tried to get into the capital raising because if you're gonna start, let's say, with broker relations, then you need to find somebody to do the underwriting, or you have to learn how to do multiple roles. So a lot of the students coming in, they'll just try to raise money because they can work on their own and then just get into a deal by bringing capital into the deal.
So they go out and try and find people
Mhm.
to put in 100,000, 200,000. Is that
Yeah,
the is
as
it
much money as you possibly can,
right?
because then you get a higher cut. So let's say they have 30% carved out of the acquisition fee for the capital raise. Then as much money as they need to raise out of that 30%, as much as you raise, you can take the whole thing if you can raise. Let's say the capital raise is 5 million bucks. If you can raise the whole $5 million, you get paid the whole 30% of the cut for the acquisition fee because the acquisition fee is divided up.
So if I raise $5 million from 8 different people and I buy a piece of property, I'm buying it for $5 million. What am I? You're saying I'm raising 5 million. What are we buying with that 5 million? We're buying something worth 5 million.
No, no. When we were talking about before, you have the loan and then you have the investor's
Okay, so
money.
that's just like the down payment. So the 5 million is like a down payment on a.
It's a down payment, it's your acquisition fee, it's rehab costs, it's closing costs. So when people are putting these deals together, aside from the down payment, there's a number of costs you have to consider.
Right. So
The
the
rest of
closing
the
costs.
money, yeah, closing costs, the rest of the money that the loan didn't cover, the acquisition fees, the closing costs, the rehab costs, how much budget did you make to rehab this apartment complex? The rehab could be 1 million, 2 million, 3 million.
Right. So I know up front if I'm trying to buy a piece of property, we're buying the property for $10 million, but we're going to need to. The bank's going to lend 7 million. We
Right.
need 2 million for the down payment, 3 million for all of these other renovation fees, all these other fees, and of course, the closing costs and my fee is going to come out of that, the extra 3 million. So you're
Right.
saying if you raise the whole $5 million, then you can. So up front, I need to raise 5 million,
Yeah.
and the more of that 5 million I raise, the
The
more
more you
money I'm
get
going to
paid.
get.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So a lot of students would try to do that. When I got into the program, what was unique about what I did was I decided to go the other route. So I had put together what I would call an acquisitions team. So I decided, we're going to go the route of finding the deals and putting together like a business plan for them. So I found other students, mostly in my area, and I was building relationships with brokers. We said, okay, we're going to find properties in Texas, in the Dallas and surrounding areas. So I was building relationships with brokers in the Dallas area. And then I had a guy that lived about 2 hours out of Boise who he drove to the class from his area and paid in. And he was underwriting, like making the business plan on this underwriting template. And then there was two 19-year-old guys who had paid into the program.
Okay.
Yeah, they also lived 2 hours away. And then another guy who had been in mortgage, and he was like, oh, I want to raise money. So I was like, okay, we have that role on the team. And then there was another guy that was 19 at the time who was really intelligent, and he was just a tenant in the duplex that I owned. So he didn't buy into the program, but he was getting into real estate. So I put this team together. So we had like broker relations, underwriting, a guy doing market research, and then these two young guys that were getting comps for the apartment complex. And so we had put this system together where we were getting deals from brokers, making business plans, and then you have to find what you call somebody to sponsor the deal. So somebody that can qualify for the loan, and then you come in under them, basically. So as a student, that's what they're saying. We will provide the sponsors for you so that you can come in and get started on these deals and then eventually build up your portfolio so that you're the sponsor. Because that person who can run the show gets paid a cut of that acquisition fee just for being the person that can run the show.
Okay.
Yeah. So go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, so you get to that point, and now you've put together a team. Do you end up buying any? You find proper? Are you finding properties, putting together the business plan? Are they buying into it? I mean, do any of these go through?
So I joined this program in June of 2021. By the beginning of August, I had put a team together. We were moving pretty fast. We were finding all these properties, running through them, trying to find a sponsor. And that's where we were kind of hitting our head on the wall. Like, we just couldn't seem to find someone to sponsor the deals.
I thought they were going to provide the sponsor.
Exactly. That's what they say anyway. Well, the thing is, their salespeople tell you that they're going to sponsor the deal. And then as soon as you pay the money for the program, they vanish. The other thing you're paying for is expert mentorship.
How much are you paying for the program?
Well, they're...
Because so far you paid $1,000 just to go to the class.
The 3-day class, right, where they're supposed to provide everything.
Yep, right.
Right.
But we already know that's not true.
Yeah, no, it wasn't true. It ends up being a $40,000 sales pitch. The program is $40,000, and it's supposed to provide expert mentorship, hold your hand through the deals, sponsorship, right?
Provide the sponsor.
And then there's a 1 month worth of videos to teach you everything you need to know to be successful in these deals. So, yeah.
You paid the 40 grand?
I ended up paying $27,000. What I ended up finding out a year later is one guy I worked with paid $4,000. The two young kids paid $18,000 together. One of the other guys paid $23,000. So me, as a single parent, they charged me more than every guy on my team. But they're telling everybody that you have to pay $40,000 for this program.
But they're making a deal. They're going to make a deal for you. We're going to let you pay. I understand the situation you're in. We're not going to try and kill you here. We're going to let you pay 27 grand or 30.
Yeah.
They tell you 30 and you say, I can't do it. What can you do? 27. Okay.
Right.
Is that kind of what happens?
That's what happens. The other interesting thing at these sales events is they ask people to open up their books, like their assets, their bank accounts, and they tell them, like, it's for your good. That way we can help you do the best that you can. We can help you see, like, you know, which investments you can get into. Like, it's for your good, not for our good, you know? So that was another interesting thing. I didn't really own anything at the time except for the duplex. So it wasn't like I was making $16 an hour. I didn't have any books to open up, but there's other people that did, and they end up getting them to invest quite a bit of money into their deals. So anyway, yeah, so I ended up buying into this program and put this team together. And what ends up happening is, one important thing, their expert mentors were like 20 to 25-year-old kids hired off of Indeed. That was one thing I learned once I got in. And so we're paying for this coaching. I never had a coach.
Right.
I never had anybody call me. Nothing. So everybody's paying, and the salespeople are saying they're sponsoring your deals. Everyone ditches you after you pay the money. There's no coach. If you call in and you get coaching, it's from like a 23-year-old that's never done real estate before.
Is there an actual location to this place? Like, can you jump in your car and drive to an actual office where you can say, hey, I want to talk to Bob?
Their first office was in Utah, but no, I mean, you can't really, but that's where their office was. Their first office was in Utah. They're making sales all over the United States every single weekend. Now their office is in Orlando.
Okay.
Yeah, they've been in Orlando for a while. So, and I've heard people can go visit the office. I'm not sure exactly why they left Utah. There's rumors that it wasn't such a good exit, but I don't know the exact reason. So yeah, they had hired a bunch of kids off of Indeed, and that's what people were paying 40 grand for. I don't think not one of their coaches had real estate experience in this particular type of real estate. But the thing with these programs is they're creating a community. So they have like a private Facebook group page, and right away, the owners are establishing like this authority that they really don't deserve. You know, they're in the sales thing, they're asking you to open your books. There's all this hype. It's kind of like you mentioned Grant Cardone, right? When you go to these events, it's kind of like going to a Tony Robbins event.
Right. It's a lot of rah, rah,
Oh,
rah.
yeah,
You can do it. You can do it.
absolutely, totally.
But not
And
a ton of substance. Not a ton of exactly.
oh,
Not
yeah.
really a step by step plan. It's more like
Oh, no.
John's going to come out on stage and tell you how much money he's made with the program. And he comes out and tells you, and you're like, wow. Bill comes out and tells you how much he's going to. And if you buy these tapes, then
Yeah.
this. And if you buy this, and if you sign up for this, he signed up. Bill was doing horrible. And then he signed up for this, and he got he got the mentorship, and the mentor helped him. And then Bill tells you about how he found a property and the guy helped him structure it, and he bought it for $1 million and put almost no money down, and then he sold the property 2 years later for $2.5 million. He pocketed $1 million, and now he's a big shot. He's in the middle of 4 more properties, and it's all because of this mentorship. And you're ready to run up your credit cards and give him as much money as you can, because damn it, you could be Bill too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I could run one of these. I could run one of these.
Yeah, you definitely
But
could.
at the
They
end
were
of,
really good
yeah.
at it, man. They
But
were
at the
really
end
good
of
at it.
you walk out of there thinking, yes.
Oh, yeah.
But in reality,
yeah.
you're like, I don't have one clue as to how to start.
Oh,
other than
yeah,
paying
nobody
to get the
did doing the videos. And this guy just had a way of making you feel like you were the best of friends. So these 1-month videos that they give you to teach you how to do this whole thing, the first week is about mindset.
Right.
This is what I've learned about these types of things, because after the fact, you go back and you're like, I'm going to learn everything that I need to know about programs, scams, everything else. You want to know after something happens to you. The 1 day to the 3 day to the sale is such a typical structure. You don't know that getting into something like this. You're not like, oh, let me go study this ahead of time. Once something happens to you, then you might go back. But this is a very typical sales structure. I had no idea. So in his videos, they're talking about mindset. And then they've got this private Facebook group where they're monitoring and controlling the environment. And if anything negative comes up, that person gets bashed on there. I mean, like attacked pretty much, or it gets deleted or something like that. So there's this whole controlled environment where nobody's saying anything. And everybody knows, like, you don't really have a coach. They're like 20 to 25-year-olds, and everyone's going, what did I pay 40 grand for? But nobody's saying anything. And then so when I got in,
Well,
I
if
looked.
you say anything, they bash you.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
They bash you because, I mean, that's the Grant Cardone, Wes Watson, these guys that they sell these programs. The moment you say, hey, listen, man, I've done everything you told me to do, and I'm not making any money, they immediately say it's because you're a loser.
Exactly.
Because you're the fuck up. You don't know what you're doing.
Yep.
You're a screw up. You're doing it wrong. And everybody else jumps on the bandwagon and bashes you, and then that guy typically goes away.
Yeah.
And they don't give him his money back. They just call him a bunch of names, tell him it's because Bob made a bunch of money. Bob's no better than you.
No, they didn't,
or maybe Bob is
It's
better.
not even true.
You're not following the program. And then that guy gets upset and he goes away, and you just get to keep his 27,000 or 40 grand or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I was thinking when you were saying earlier that, like the main guy, the front man, like, he's usually typically super charismatic, good looking,
Absolutely.
Looks successful. They tried that with like a fat, poor, ugly guy. But, con men eventually realized like this isn't the way to go. We can't have the fat, ugly guy with no money go out here. We need to get a well-spoken, clean-cut, rich guy. That's the guy that's why they do that.
You have to see the other partners, and then you'll know why they picked.
They picked him. Out of the 3, this is the guy. You guys You can't be on camera.
Exactly. Well, the other one was a terrible speaker too.
Well, I was wondering, I'm thinking the one guy, and then I'm thinking like the one guy you never hear about. That's really the fall guy.
There's one, even though there's not a fall quite yet.
Right.
They're trying to make one guy the fall guy for sure. So around, I would say October, maybe November, they used to do these group calls, like Zoom calls, right? And what I noticed, so when I got into the private Facebook group, and this thing was growing insanely, there was probably 80 people in the private Facebook group. Next thing I know, there's 1,000. Next thing I know, there's 2,000. I mean, it was just growing so fast. So we're doing these Zoom calls. There's like 100 people. The next year, there's 1,000 people, just growing.
Next year?
Well, I don't know. I was just making that up. But I'm saying it was just growing really quickly. So it was about November. I was on one of the weekly Zoom calls, and one of the guys that hosted them was like, oh, one of the owners wants to mentor students. And give me a call tomorrow. We'll set that up. And so we're sitting here hitting our heads on the wall like we have no sponsor. We have this system. I was building relationships with brokers in Texas. We're getting properties to underwrite and see if the numbers work out. And so I go, okay, cool. So I call in, and then we start meeting with one of the owners. And what he ends up doing is connecting us with his partner because they were buying apartments. And anyway, so we get connected to Lisa. She actually came to my team because she had 2 sons that were the same age as those 3 young guys on my team.
I'm all about productivity, feeling energized, and staying strong, no matter how old I get. But let's face it, aging can slow you down. That's why I started taking Qualia Senolytic. As we get older, our bodies pick up these things called senescent cells, or zombie cells, that can make you feel stiff, tired, and achy. These cells take up space and suck nutrients from the healthy cells we need. But that's where Qualia Senolytic can help. Qualia Senolytics help remove those dead cells so the healthy ones can thrive. It's like hitting the reset button on your body. Qualia Senolytics is vegan, non-GMO, gluten-free, and the ingredients are all about working together to support your health. The best part is you only have to take it 2 days a month, and they have a 100-day money-back guarantee. So if you want to feel younger and boost your energy, go to qualialife.com/true and get up to 50% off. Use code TRUE for an extra 15% off your order. Try it risk-free with a 100-day money-back guarantee. Trust me, your future self will thank you, and thank you to Qualia for sponsoring today's episode.
And was like, hey, I want to work with you. My kids are this age. I really like your guys' vibe. And since I was like the only person in the whole program that had put together that kind of team, I was becoming very popular. And the coaches who didn't have experience were sending the students to me to coach. I wasn't getting paid.
I was going to say, are you charging to pay?
No.
Okay.
No. And I was just like, okay, but I was like loving that I found something. I'm like, man, I'm actually good at this. I had all these crappy $16 an hour jobs. And then, I'm like, the only thing I was teaching people was how to put a team together. And the guys I was working with had put together these processes. And that was it. I wasn't trying to teach people anything about buying apartments. I was no expert in apartments. That's what I was paying people to teach me.
Right. But at this point, had you found an apartment complex and closed on it yet?
No. So anyway, we had found a property in Waco through a broker that I had met. It was a 172 unit property in Waco. And old, 1973, but that's what we thought we were supposed to go get, a property that you rehab and fix up and sell. Ended up being a real dump, man.
I was gonna say they're not selling they're not selling brand new, perfect properties at a discount. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah,
you have to find
right.
one that's older that needs a rehab like that to get a deal.
Right, right. So yeah, this was the beginning of 2022 when we started the process for this Waco property. So as we're getting into this, there's presentations being done to raise money. It was going to be an $8 million raise, and the purchase price was $16.3 million for this property. So man, like as a new student coming in, I was the only person who had put this type of team together. We're getting this huge property for our first deal. Like it was just like, oh my God, I just went from the shit life struggling parent to this is amazing,
Right.
Also, at the same time, they did their first yearly event at that time. And so they asked me to speak on a panel. And so I was on the stage twice, I want to say. And it was just crazy because, like I said, the program was growing insanely. So we were in Vegas for that event at the Paris, I think it was called the Paris Hotel. And so me and my team are there, and like I'm trying to walk through the hotel, and all these students are like stopping me, like, how did you do it? How did you do it? And so it was just kind of like this.
Right. But you haven't done anything yet. You just have the deal.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay.
It was a real trip. It was a real trip. It made me realize at the time how people make money like that.
Yeah.
And how some of the students later on down the road took advantage of other students because you know what? I could have done the same thing at the time. What
Yeah.
did I know? Their videos didn't even teach you that much. Oh, here's how you make a broker call. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm great with people. I didn't need your crap to learn how to make a broker call. I was building relationships with brokers in Texas, genuine friendships. So,
Right.
there wasn't really anything they were teaching you, not SEC, guidelines, not PPMs, which private placement memorandums, not operating agreements. I mean, they're not teaching you any real substantial stuff that once you get into the deal and you don't understand, you're going to be royally screwed. They're not teaching you anything substantial,
Right.
probably intentionally. I don't know. Anyway, so we start the whole process to buy this deal, and there's stuff looking back now, like I wasn't really involved in any of the conversations with the brokers, which was my broker. And then, they have investor portals and different things that they're using. And we weren't really being mentored at all. But this whole time, you're thinking like, okay, well, I'm not really learning anything, but we have this community. Oh, they're going to have our back. And then I'm getting into a deal and you're thinking, well, I'm supposed to get mentored through the deal. Okay. And I'm in a deal with the owners. So this is my opportunity to learn.
All right.
It didn't happen like that at all. So we get into the deal. We have like a text group chat where we're just hearing about things here and there. And at first the occupancy, was going up. It seemed fine at first. Lisa.
Wait a minute. Did you close the deal?
Oh, yes. Sorry. So they did end up raising, I've seen different amounts. So I've seen 8.4 million. I've seen 8.2 million. Last I heard, it was an $8.1 million raise. And then recently in a group chat, Lisa said they raised 7.9 million. So there's been all these different numbers I've seen through texts, emails, things like that. It was a $12.375 million loan we got on this deal. And
you bought it for 16.
16.3.
You're supposed to raise 8.
Right.
You feel like you raised roughly close. You're not positive.
Somewhere around $8 million, right?
They borrowed 12 for the rehab. So did they close on the whole deal?
We closed on the deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you get paid?
I got paid some money. Yeah.
Some,
so what was
it,
interesting?
Was it what you thought it was going to be?
Yeah. It was what I thought it was going to be. One thing that was interesting though was, so you have these loan guarantors. Well, as a student, I had put some of the upfront money in because people have to front the money for lawyers' fees, earnest money, and whatnot. And then they can get it back from the investors once they raise it. Okay. So I had upfront $50,000 into the lawyer's fees, earnest money, whatever it was, right? So they told us, you build your portfolio by getting on these loans. So I was like, okay, well, I put upfront costs when none of my teammates did. So I want to be on the loan so I can build my portfolio. So I did not qualify for the loan at all. I mean, obviously, I wasn't an accredited investor. I was making very little money, but they let me go on the loan with the rest of them because they qualified for the loan. So I was on the loan, and then I ended up putting my $50,000 into the property as a limited partner. So I was a general partner, a limited partner, and a loan guarantor. So
Okay.
I kind of played every single role because of all the videos they did with Lisa and their track record of the properties that they did in North Carolina that were super highly successful. So, you're seeing this track record of success. You're being told you're going to be mentored, all these different things. So we closed on the property in July of 2022. And at the time, it seemed like it was going pretty well.
Real quick. Okay. Did you get your 50,000 back?
No.
How much money did you make?
Well, that all
your
just
fee?
happened in December. That all just happened in December of this last year. The property foreclosed. So
Well, I understand
comes.
that. I understand that. But when you closed, you thought you
Uh-huh.
were going to get a certain amount of money.
Oh yeah, I got a portion of that 5% acquisition fee.
Okay.
Mhm.
Was it enough to cover the 50,000 that you put in?
No,
Oh.
no, not even.
So you're in the hole
Yeah.
after the closing. Okay. So
Yeah,
go ahead.
like 20 grand.
Okay. So
Yeah.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
So at the beginning, it seemed like things were going pretty well from what I could tell. One thing I didn't know, the lenders took me off the email. I didn't know this until recently, and the property management took me off the emails. I did not know that. So I'm a new student. I don't really know anything. I'm supposed to be being mentored, and I'm thinking everything's going along fine, and it seemed to be for a few months. So I didn't know there was emails about liens. We weren't paying people doing work. I didn't know that they had the roofs replaced and the people totally screwed them up. There was a bunch of stuff I didn't know for the longest time. What I did notice, though, was pretty much all the communication through the text messages had stopped. There wasn't really much communication going on. Well, I was just kind of like, okay, we just paid all this money to get mentored, and where are these people? There was very little communication, and then it just kind of halted. So time's going on, and I had built a friendship with Lisa, or kind of so I thought. So I was communicating with her regularly, and then these people were all supposed to be the experts. So me and my teammates are assuming this property is being properly managed, things are being done. And at the beginning of 2023, we go to try to buy a second property. So we're going into 2023 thinking, oh, we're buying this property. I mean, gosh, how much better can things get? I had all this struggle. I found my thing. I'm doing great. And like I had said before, I had students coming to me every day. They were sending their students to me to coach.
Okay. So real quick, you keep saying you're doing great.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the hole. You haven't been paid. You've put together a team of people that aren't being paid. You forked out 50 grand
Mm-hmm.
for upfront fees.
Right.
These other people that are mentoring you, that are qualifying for the loan and everything else, haven't put up a dime. That doesn't sound to me like you're doing great at all.
Well, they paid into,
And you closed on it, got a check,
Right.
still didn't recoup your original investment. You've been working
Right.
on this over a year,
Yeah.
and you're in the hole. You're not doing great.
Yeah.
I don't know what you're about to say, but I promise you at the end of it, whatever you're about to say, I still am going to think you're not doing great.
Right.
Why didn't you think to yourself? I understand, like I get that we go to these seminars, people are coming up to me. Like they respect me. They're asking my advice. I'm an authority. I'm being asked to talk on stage. All of that is a great feeling, but in the end, I'm in the hole.
Well, I could have taken the $50,000 back. I didn't have to put it into the deal. So I could have, when we closed and they got the investors' money, I could have taken the money I put up front for the lawyer's fees and the earnest money back, and then kept my acquisition fee. So I would have made about 30 grand.
Why didn't you?
Well, like I said before, I had seen like these people's track record,
You're
and so
kind of rolling it
I
over.
chose to invest the money, thinking
So you're rolling it over,
yeah,
into the next deal,
right? Because a couple months prior to that is when I sold the duplex.
Okay.
Yeah, and I made that money that I was going to invest in other duplexes, but I had altered my route and like, oh, this is going so great. So I chose to invest that $50,000 in Waco.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're gonna continue to run with it, thinking at some point
It's going great.
It's going
Yeah.
great. It's gonna pay off. And you don't really need the money right now. You've got 100 grand or so.
Yeah, I didn't need it at the time. And when Waco sells, I should have gotten, like doubled that money.
Right.
So in 3 to 5 years. So yeah. And then, I made some acquisition fee. And then when I do the next property, I'm going to make an acquisition fee. And we were on track to do that, like
Okay.
at least one property a year. And we were looking to build up to do a couple properties a year. And we were thinking we were building relationships with all these sponsors that seemed to be solid people at the time. Not so much what I learned, kind of as time was going on.
Okay. So what happened with the next deal?
So with the next deal, we turn in like our offer for this $15.5 million deal. I was on the purchase and sale agreement. Lisa and Greg were on the purchase and sale agreement. I suggested like, oh, so we can win this bid, let's put $100,000 hard. So, again, taking the advice of the mentors, I was like, okay. So I put in a portion of that money, that earnest money, which went hard, meaning you can't get it back, like pretty much right away. And this was the advice of, people they're suggesting are mentoring, the sponsors. And then they have this second event. We're at this event, and again, like, I think I was on the stage 3 times at that event. They had the students vote for, let's do a vote for who's the most helpful person in the network. Oh, guess who won that award? I did. So I'm on the stage. So they have a luau at this event. So I'm at this event. We don't have anybody to raise the money for a $15.5 million deal at this point. And it's just, people everywhere, activity going on constantly. So I am running around like a crazy person the whole event trying to find somebody else capable of raising that much money that had experience. So we get connected to another sponsor that they are promoting because they're having calls where they're promoting sponsors to their students. And you would think there would be some kind of accountability if this is what people are paying for. You're saying you're paying money for these people to sponsor your deals, right?
Right.
So we find this guy, older guy in his 60s who, kind of advertised his Christianity and being a recovered addict and built houses in Mexico and all this stuff. And he seemed like a really awesome guy to come in, work with Lisa and Greg and sponsor and be in charge of the money raise for this second deal. And this guy told us like 3 times, I can do this with my eyes closed. I don't know if that should have been a red flag to have somebody say that. But, he was like, yeah, I'm in. He went over the underwriting multiple times. He talked to the property management company to make sure like, hey, do you think this business plan is going to work? Like before I come all in on this, do you think this is going to work? The property management company that we were using for the Waco deal, because this was in Arlington, Texas. So we're like, okay, we got somebody. And I'm just like running around like a mad person. So We got someone that was supposedly going to raise the money and be in charge of the money raise. Well, he gets on a plane with his wife to Egypt for a 1.5 month vacation. We hit our closing date, which, as you know, being in mortgages, I'm sure, you have to pay money to extend that date.
Right.
So you say you're going to raise $10.5 million. We had a huge money raise for this deal, and you get on a plane for a month and a half. So once we hit that date, I had to put more money in. Lisa had also put money in. He had also put money in.
More money you don't get back.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, to extend for the broker, the seller to extend out the closing date. So he comes back and, we start doing webinars for this deal for investors, and he starts bringing in random students that have no experience. And I'm like thinking, wait a minute, how are we going to raise this huge amount of money? You should be bringing in people with experience, right? And he said he also was going to raise a bunch of money, and he's traveling here and he's traveling there. I went on his Facebook page and made a timeline of where he was every frickin' day. He was like out of town doing something this whole time. So I'm like having to go around for months and months and months and try to figure out who I'm going to find that's capable of raising all this money, because there's going the rest of my money into this deal. And I'm not working a job. I got offered from a wealth management company locally when we went to pitch this deal to them and see if they had people that could partner with us. The guy was like, oh, hey, do you want to come to work for me? I'll pay you $60,000 a year. I'll pay for you to get licensed and all this stuff. I couldn't take that job because I was losing all my money in this deal. So for all these months, he's dumping random students on us, and we're like losing this deal. So anyway, it gets all extended out until October, and we lose the deal. And I lose my money, and he's just traveling around all over the place. Well, about that time, it all kind of starts revealing itself. Like, there was things going on with the Waco property that I didn't know. Like, there was a gas leak on the Waco property for 2 months, and nobody was really communicating about the property. And there's a guy that is going to sue us because he has brain damage. This Waco property was one of 7 properties that was in a fund, a $30 million fund that they had. It was their first fund. And I didn't know that. None of us knew that our property was in this $30 million fund, and the fund is starting to fail. Like, I knew our property wasn't really being managed because of the lack of communication.
Right.
And so I was kind of assuming the same thing was happening with pretty much all those properties. So I'm like, okay, that's when I start looking back on everything that seemed not quite right, but I was new and I didn't know. Like, for example, after we closed our deal in July, that December, I randomly found an ad with a link on Facebook to invest in our deal. And we had already closed, fully funded. So I was like, okay, what are they doing with this money?
Right. Why are they still raising money on a deal that closed?
Right.
You can't invest in it anymore.
Exactly. The other thing was they had gotten $900,000 taken off of the purchase price like a month before we closed. They still charged the investors the acquisition fee off of the higher price.
Right.
I was like, okay, why are you doing that? They were like, oh, it's a credit, no big deal. I mean, there was just these things along the way that didn't seem right, but I was a student. So I was like, okay. And then it just kind of all started unraveling. So they had other properties that were going down, and I kind of started going, okay, well, is that why they took Sarah out of our deal? Because they needed her to go raise money and save these other deals. once we lost that deal, we even tried to sue the seller, who was another bigwig program owner guy in Texas, ironically, selling the deal. Yeah, he's actually been in many, many articles for not so above board things, but pretty very well-known guy actually. Um, Once that didn't close and I lost that money, I was like, okay, this just isn't right. You're promoting the sponsor that didn't do his job. They're getting me into these situations where I could be legally held liable. I mean, I find out about the guy that has brain damage at some point. There's the lawsuit that could happen with the seller, and you're playing me like a pawn. Like, you take this lady out of my deal, kind of shuffling people around, and that at that point I start calling attorneys because these two, the sponsors, they made a decision. Oh, I forgot this. So in August, the two people that the company promoted, Lisa and then this other guy, they made a decision to quit raising money. And we had just paid for another extension until October. So me and Lisa are on the PSA, not this other guy. They have a meeting without me. I'm doing all this work trying to raise money while they're dumping students on me. Like, oh, this lady can raise money. How about her? Holding webinars, I know nothing about doing. I'm just working, 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 trying to save my money, constantly working. And they have a little meeting and decide we're not going to raise money anymore. And I'm like, okay. They're like, we're going to go find someone to assign contract to. Well, they didn't mean we, they meant you. You are going to go find someone to assign contract to. Because at that point, nobody was doing anything except for me. Like, even my teammates had pretty much bailed out on the whole thing. And they didn't have money involved to lose, only I did.
Right, but they're working for nothing. Like,
Yeah.
they're bailing out because it's been a year and change and they haven't really made any money, thinking money's coming their way, but every deal they're in the hole.
Well, they weren't in the hole because they didn't put any money in. So, I mean,
Are they being paid?
they got paid part of the acquisition fee on Waco.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they made a little bit of money, but
Yeah, they made a little bit of money. So yeah, they decide we're gonna quit the raise, and I'm like going, okay, so I'm on the PSA with Lisa, and her and this guy make a decision, and they get on a Zoom call and they say it to me and like all these random students that they brought in to raise money. And I was just pissed because it was like, I'm doing all this work, I'm going to lose my money, and now you two go and make a decision without me when my name's on the purchase and sale agreement. Like, I was just so dumbfounded the whole time how any of this stuff could have been legal. It was just crazy to me, and it got even crazier as time went on. So at the end of that, I decided to go talk to attorneys and see, like, okay, these guys don't do their jobs at all, and then they make this decision without me that cost me my money. So can I hire an attorney and get my money back, basically? Well, as I'm going and talking to attorneys, one of them says at one point, how did you get into this whole thing in the first place?
right.
And so, no, he goes, no, go back. How did you get into this in the first place? Well, I paid for this He goes, whoa, I want you to write this all down. You got into it through a program? And I was like, yeah. So he has me write down everything that happened. And it was at that point when attorneys would start to listen to me, because they say, like, you're fraudulently induced through a program and then into the first deal, and all this stuff is leading up to where you end up. That's what the attorneys started to tell me. Because at first I was just approaching them about the one deal, not how I got brought in, not all the stuff they were telling me that they were going to do, not that they bring me into this first deal, none of that stuff. So I had a couple of attorneys tell me, like, oh, okay, yeah, well, in that case, I guess, we'll represent you, see if we can settle out of court. So I ended up hiring one guy. who is pretty pricey, and then he brings in a partner and doesn't really explain to me like, "Oh, you're gonna be paying all this money for the 2 of us,
Mhm.
and we're gonna have all these discussions that you're gonna pay for just to write some demand letters." So, they don't read my documents, they have a bunch of discussions they charge me for, and then we're supposed to get on a Zoom call that next week. Me and my attorneys, him and his attorneys. Well, for some reason, nobody tells me anything, and they just get on a phone call with him without me.
Okay.
And I'm like, "Why did that happen?" They're like, "Oh, that's normal." Okay. And then everything kind of went downhill from there. I didn't know they had multiple conversations with him. And at the end, they were having me talk to him. And anyway, in my opinion, I just felt like the whole thing was a really bad idea, the way that it was dealt with. And obviously I didn't end up getting any of my money back, not for the program, not for the things that had happened. And the Waco property had started like kind of being on the verge of foreclosure.
Mhm.
So after 2 years of hardly any communication with any of the property owners, they come back together and are like, "We need to talk." So in this whole time, I'm having students coming to me asking me how they can get their money back. And nobody's saying anything.
Right.
Nobody's saying anything. There's one review on Bigger Pockets by a guy named Zach Harsh, and that's it. And then after, yeah, anyway.
So you start helping those students try and get their money back? You're trying to get your money back. Are you helping them try and get their money back?
I did.
Okay.
I did. They asked me like what they should do. I was like, write in letters. And they were like, "Well, what should I say?" So I would tell them, "Well, if it was me, this is what I would say." And then they would come back to me with the response from the company and one of the owners. But they would come back with the responses, and I would be like, "Okay, well, this is what I would say back." And I helped quite a few people get their money back.
So, I mean, at what point, when do you get to the point where you're like, you're either going to sue, or how does this move on to any type of like, do you ever go to law enforcement? Do you ever decide I'm going to hire these attorneys to sue?
So I had been kicked off of all the emails. They they ended up kicking me out of the Slack channel because at that point, since my attorneys got nowhere, I decided to go on Facebook and start talking about everything they were doing, about how their program, they straight up lie at the 3-day classes. All these people at that point start commenting on my Facebook. There's probably a good 400 comments on my Facebook. Once I started talking, other students started sharing their stories. One lady came to me and was like, "Oh, by the way, so before me, the owners told me and my family, we're going to sponsor this deal for you. Put 200,000 earnest money in," and then they backed out completely and they lost $200,000. And I'm just sitting there going, all this stuff was happening to people before me and they didn't say shit.
Right.
Nothing. And this is still happening. They're still selling the program. So I'm on Facebook, I'm on TikTok, I did a Bigger Pockets review. My attorneys get nowhere. And it's been really interesting. So my attorneys at the end, I just end up paying them a certain amount of dollar and cut ties because it was just not a good situation. They tell me, "Well, go find other investors and partner up with them for a lawsuit." That's what they told me to do. So I'm having to go look for other investors. Well, I end up finding out that my property was in this fund, this Akahi fund, this $30 million fund. And those were the only people I met, was some of the people in this fund. And not only are these people, including a number of senior citizens that have their whole life savings involved in this fund that's failing, losing their money, but they have to listen to one of the owners sit there and like gossip about their partner, which to me is just abusive behavior. They send in emails asking for profit and loss statements, asking for bank statements, asking for these different things. and they don't give it to them. They don't reply to the emails, which, according to different attorneys out there about these deals, that's not legal. You're supposed to be business partners and give your partners all this information.
Right. There's supposed to be transparency.
Transparent. In the same way with me, being a general partner, you are not supposed to kick a general partner out of communication. One of the biggest things that shocked me was the lender quit communicating with me. I'm on the loan, and the lender kicked me out of the communication. And then at the very end, when we foreclosed, he had his attorney send me an email saying that they weren't going to communicate with me anymore. So I never got final documents on the foreclosure.
Okay.
The property management, I went to them to try to get real financials because there was no real financials. There was just little pieces of paper, bank statements that had things blacked out and different, no real bank statements. Even when my attorneys sent in demand letters for where did every cent relating to this deal go, they did not send it. They refused. They ghosted my attorney, or they wrote back and said she already has it, which wasn't true. So I went to the property management to get the real financials. The guy told me on the phone, I will not give it to you. My name was on their reports that they were sending to the lenders, the financials and reports and stuff. And the guy said, I won't give it to you. And I was like, why? I'm on this business. I'm a part of this business. Well, you're not Lisa. I'm not giving it to you. So I ended up having to write an email and put Lisa on it and put one of the attorneys on it and demand them. And then I got him, but like, how did this happen? How did these outside companies end up having all these communications without me and kicking me out when I'm on the loan? You see what I'm saying?
Right. I understand.
Yeah.
So what did you do after the lawyers? Like, at some point, don't the authorities get involved?
Well, I reported to the Attorney General in multiple states, and so have other people. I went to the Idaho Department of Finance, which is supposed to be for investments. I talked to the supervisor there for like 45 minutes, who told me he wouldn't do anything about it. He was like, you can email me info, but I'm not going to do anything.
Why? Did he say why?
Too much. They had too many things going on, and it wasn't a blatant, like, no property exists altogether.
Right. Was it a blatant fraud?
Right. It wasn't like, oh, there's no property at all. Like I have too much on my plate to deal with something like this, basically. And then I did turn in, who else? Oh, the FTC. Me and a number of students have reported to the FTC. And then a lot of the investors started turning in complaints to the SEC. So, but other than that, I've just kind of had to fight and fight and fight and try to talk to attorneys. And it's been very hard to get representation. Like, I had an attorney come to me because I'm on social media speaking publicly and say, I'll represent you. And then we have a conversation. He looks at my paperwork and he's like, oh, they put an arbitration clause in there. So never mind. That's too much to deal with. So it's just been, one of those things where it's like just you trying to fight for yourself and the other people that are involved and put this out in the open, because they're still making sales every weekend. Both of the owners have gone on to create new LLCs and buy new properties with new students. So they're just doing the same thing. You change your company name and you go do the exact same thing. How do you have the time for that, but you don't have the time to manage the properties right now that are going down the toilet? How does that work?
Well, I mean, if they spent money managing those apartments, they wouldn't have the time to raise as much money.
Right.
So, and where the money, their profit is raising the money
right up front. So
Right.
when they take those 5% and the 1% fees up front, they're getting paid for work they haven't even done yet.
Right.
And then why do you care that failed for 2 years?
Right.
Yeah, because there was like a bunch of stuff I didn't mention either. Like that 5% acquisition fee, they didn't put that on the closing statement. So there was little things that I kind of had to like backtrack and learn along the way. Like, I saw this one guy's post. He was like, "Oh, 5% acquisition fee. What a some word for fraud." So I was looking through the comments and one guy said, "Oh, I wonder what the SEC thinks of that." And then another guy says, "Oh, I want to see that closing statement." And I thought to myself, shit, I have the closing statement. So I go back and look at the closing statement for Waco. There's no 5% acquisition fee on that closing statement. They put 1% on the closing statement for the lenders to see.
Probably because 5% is it's illegal to charge a 5% fee.
But they're using that on all their public advertisements, on YouTube, on Facebook, on everything. So that's really interesting. The other thing was with the lenders, when I was looking through that, so you know how I told you it was around an $8 million raise, and these people can't keep track of shit. Every email says something different, but they told the lenders that we had 6.5 million in equity from investors. So that was another like big gap in the money when I
Right.
started looking through everything. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, 8.2 to 6.5 million dollars is a pretty big difference. And looking back on the lender emails, we were working with a lending broker at the beginning, and Lisa told the lending broker that all the loan guarantors, she said 6 or 7 people, were all going to be investing $50,000 in the property because they want to know that the general partners have skin in the game,
Right.
so that stuff like this doesn't happen. And they didn't invest. When I looked at the investor portal, which luckily I copied and pasted onto a Word document because they shut me out of the investor portal, they did not have any of their own money invested in this Waco property. So the owners of the program that bring me into the deal and their partners, I put $50,000 in that I lost. They had no money invested. And the other thing was they could have taken me off the loan before it foreclosed. And because I was on social media talking, they chose not to. So they let me get like a $12 million foreclosure for no reason. And I went to the lenders a number of times too and asked them to remove me, and they refused to remove me as well. So they said, well, your partners can, and they wouldn't remove me. So in my opinion, you guys should pay me a bunch of money for what you did, but to actually choose not to just remove me from a loan, that sounds like a pretty personal vendetta to me.
Like there's an SEC investigation, right? At some point, the SEC comes in,
Right.
and the SEC says, "Hey, will you sit down with us and go over all of this?"
Yeah.
So and did you brought? When did that happen?
Not that long ago, about a month probably.
Where did that take place?
Just at my house.
So what, they just came in with 2 agents, or was it 3 agents? Who was there?
Yeah, just a phone call, FBI and SEC.
Okay. And so how long did you talk to them? You lay all this out over the course of an hour or 2, or?
Yeah, probably an hour and a half.
Did you provide them with the documentation?
Yeah, I still am.
So
Yeah.
there's
other investors involved as well.
So the SEC is investigating, which probably takes a year or 2. And then the FBI is sitting in on the phone call. And from my experience, the reason the FBI sits in on these phone calls or these meetings is because the SEC will come forward and they'll start a civil lawsuit, and they'll file a lawsuit against numerous people. And then, of course, if those people end up trying to fight the case, they'll typically go to trial. It's a civil trial. And during the civil trial, they end up divulging a bunch of things, right? They're subject to discovery. You get to go through all their stuff. They end up fighting an entire case. And even if they win civilly, which doesn't sound like that's going to happen here, but I'm not a lawyer. So
Right.
if they win or lose civilly, I've seen them lose. I've seen companies win the civil case, and then the FBI brings a criminal case against them. And then of course, they're just doomed, because the FBI doesn't indict anybody criminally that they don't already think they have a solid case at. And they got like a 97% conviction rating. So, but all of that takes a lot of time. And
It
just
does.
like you said, they're continuing to
Sell every weekend.
Yeah.
And bring new investors in from their bring new students in. And things of that nature, which is very unfortunate.
How'd you get hooked up with Barry?
Um,
Because we had Barry on the program. He
okay.
did like an hour and change, 2 hours. Was it 2 hours? Might have been 2 or 3 hours. Barry's a talker.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, we talked to Barry, and that's how you and I got connected.
Right,
Um,
right.
so we did his story, but how did you hook up with him?
Yeah, so a lot of the students have been trying to help me as much as they can, connect me to different people. So a young man hit me up through Messenger, sent me like his Instagram link, and I didn't know anybody was out here kind of advocating for how these Regulation D deals really need change. I mean, they really do. If there's one thing I want to come out of this interview, there is a whole world. This is one example of things that are happening every single day in these deals. Just one example. This Regulation D exemption needs major overhaul. But so he connected me to his Instagram page, and I messaged him immediately, and we've been talking ever since. And I've been working with him, helping him collect info on some other cases he has going on. But I'm looking to start working with him, and he helps victims get restitution and things like that. So it's really awesome to see somebody out there doing something about this, because kind of like I mentioned earlier, it's hard to get help from attorneys in these types of deals and whatnot. So yeah, I'm going to start working with Barry and help out with some of these kinds of deals.
Hey, you guys, if you like the video, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell so you get notified of videos just like this. Also, we're going to leave all of Fiya's links for her social media in the description box. We're also going to leave Barry's link so you can contact him if you're having any problems. If you want to be on the show, you think you got a great crime story, please contact us. There's a link in the description box. Also, you can click on that. You can go leave like a 3-minute video. Tell us about your story. Also, please consider joining our Patreon. It's $10 a month. It helps Colby and I make these videos. Once again, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. See ya.